I bet you didn't think that climate change would ever be a topic of the Aliyah day, but it is, in fact, and it's very interesting. We're going to be looking at some insights to Parashat Noach and climate change, and looking at some spiritual aspects of this. Interesting aspects indeed. Probably going to surprise you. Doesn't really surprise me. Not that I don't know. Maybe I didn't say that right. Whenever I see things or hear things that the world is really into and a lot of people get excited about, and then I see the biblical perspective, and particularly the Jewish perspective, which in fact is the biblical perspective. I love it when people say, we don't celebrate Jewish holidays, we celebrate Bible holidays. Sigh. Judaism is biblical. So they are Jewish holidays, which means they're Bible holidays. Can we stop saying that? Is that okay? Okay, great. So anyway, so welcome. Glad you're here. We're also going to have some other insights that I want to share with you today. Some things that got left on the table. I really wanted to talk about the Tower of Babel, but we're just not going to have time to do that. But don't worry, it's going to be part of stuff that we talk about down the road. So it's going to be okay. We're not going to miss out. There's just good things that I want to share that I feel like are relevant for us right now. So please like this video, share it with your friends, family, neighbors, strangers, random people you meet on the street. They will bless you for it and thank you for it. And so also comment on the videos when you see them posted, because that's always helpful for people to connect with you as well. So I want to share an insight right off the bat, something that I haven't mentioned. And that is the birth of Noah itself. I'm fond of saying, because it's true, that there is nothing new in the New Testament. Zero, zilch, nada. Nothing that Yeshua said was particularly new. There was no changes that were made at all. Zero. In the way that God interacts with man. There's certainly nothing new or particularly, what's the word I'm looking for? Revelatory that Paul said. Zero, zilch, nada. And this is important things, and I've always asked, because I'm sure there's people out there that are just, when I say that, they're like, what? But in the years that I've said this, I've never had anybody, effectively challenge it, because there isn't. Okay. Now, why do I bring this up? Because, and why isn't there new things? And we've gone over this over and over and over and over and over. And the reason primarily the reason there's no new things is because God doesn't have to have anything new, because everything he did at the beginning is perfect. It's just renewals, because he's perfect, right? You only have to have something new if the old thing didn't work, right? Isn't that true? You get something new because something wore out, or it didn't work, or it didn't have its desired effect. Well, in our world, that makes perfect sense. You buy a pair of shoes, they wore out, you need a new pair of shoes. You bought something, some device or something to accomplish a task. It didn't quite work for you, so you bought something new to accomplish the same task. That makes sense, because we are, what's the word? Human. But for God, that doesn't make sense, because there ain't nothing that and to use bad English, there ain't nothing, honey, that he does that was bad or didn't work. Once he creates something, it's going to work. Once he puts something into effect, it is effectual. We're the problem. So we need renewal. Okay. The other reason why there is not, let me start using good English. The reason there is not anything new is because God wants to show us patterns. He has to show us patterns, because we need patterns. We need, you remember the old story, Hansel and Gretel, they follow the crumbs. We need to be able to follow the crumbs. I think that's actually a bad story. Don't they get eaten or something? Some of the nursery rhymes are kind of dark, actually. But anyway, I digress. So the pattern here we see in Noah, it says Methuselah took a wife for his son Lamech, and she bore him a man child. This comes from the legends of the Jews, actually. The body of the babe was white as snow and red as a blossoming rose. And the hair of his head and his long locks were white as wool, and his eyes like the rays of the sun. Does any of this sound familiar? When he opened his eyes, he lightened up the whole house like the sun, and the whole house was full of light. Okay. It says, and when he was taken from the hand of the midwife, he opened his mouth and praised the Lord of righteousness. His father Lamech was afraid of him and fled and came to his own father Methuselah, and he said to him, I have begotten a strange son. He's like a human being, but resembles the children of the angels of heaven. And his nature is different, and he's not like us, and his eyes are like the rays of the sun, and his countenance is glory. And it seems to me that he is not sprung from me, but yet from the angels. And I fear that in his day a wonder may be brought on the earth. And now, my father, I am here to petition thee and to implore thee that you may go to Enoch our father and learn from his truth, for his dwelling place is among the angels. So this is talking about, obviously, about the birth of Noah, and the place is filled with light, and he has this angelic look, and his eyes are like fire. Like blazing lights. Anyway, we're going to see this again when Abraham is born. Something very similar, if not nearly identical, happens. Why is this relevant? Well, think about the birth of Messiah Yeshua. There's a star, shines a light. People are in awe of his appearance, etc. This child that was born in Bethlehem during Sukkot, not during the winter, certainly not Christmas. Did you know, by the way, I know you know this already. Incidentally, let me say this, a little plug, because we're coming up, we're still in this very extraordinarily demonic time of year known as Halloween. God help us. But after we clear Halloween, which couldn't come too soon, we automatically go into the Xmas season. So I have two videos on this channel. One is, both of them are about Christmas, right? I want to make you aware of them so that you can show them or teach or share them. That's what I meant to say. Share them with your friends and family and coworkers, strangers on the street, random people you happen to run into at Walmart. You can share this information with them, and I think it's really good. But did you know that maybe I mentioned in the video? I'm sure I do. I can't imagine not. But Christmas actually is, and it was originally, the birthday of a deity. Did you know that? The deity in question, however, is Sol Invictus, who was the sun god of Rome and the personal deity, if you will, the chosen religious deity of survey says Constantine. Shocker. That's right. Constantine worshipped Sol Invictus. All the pictures you see, all the lithographs you see of antiquity, where it shows the little guy doing this and he's got the halo, and everybody says, look, that's Jesus Christ. That's actually Sol Invictus. True story. It's actually historical fact. So everybody who looks at those icons and worships them are literally, not even kidding, looking at a picture of the pagan deity Sol Invictus and worshiping it. Not even kidding. But anyway, going back to this, so we see a pattern here. Whenever somebody who is extraordinarily righteous and is going to do something supernatural, going to do a wonder in the work, do something magnificent, their birth has it has an impact, right? So Noah's birth is, man, it's not, certainly not. Oh, this happens to Moses too, in the ancient writings. And so what you see here is over and over and over again, you see a pattern emerge in which men, godly men, if you will, who are going to accomplish amazing things, their birth is accompanied by supernatural events. That's the point I'm trying to make. And so that's why when you look at these things in ancient Jewish literature, it becomes important to know. So, okay, let's look at, before we get off into any other insights, let us look at climate change, because this came into some of the interesting insights regarding the rainbow. I talked about the rainbow yesterday, and there were some interesting things. Remember, I said yesterday that the rainbow, there is the opinion of the commentators based on the Hebrew, nearly the almost unanimous opinion. There's a few who disagree, but there's almost unanimous opinion that the rainbow has always been, but we couldn't see it because of atmospheric differences pre-flood and post-flood. We couldn't see it. So looking at this idea of climate change, so to a very large degree, climate change, and this is my humble opinion based on what I see, the whole climate change issue for a great many people is like a religion. It's like religious, it's really gets into earth worship. Does Judaism believe in taking care of our environment? Absolutely. It is forbidden in Jewish ethics to basically trash the earth, to destroy the earth, the litter, and so forth. Judaism is very much into caring for and being compassionate towards animals and things like this. This is why hunting is not, as in terms of a sport, hunting is not really a sport amongst Jewish people. Have Jewish people hunted? Yes. For what reason? For food. But just to kill animals, just to kill them, to get their fur and stuff like that, that's really frowned upon in Judaism, for sure. So taking care of the earth and being responsible to the earth is very much a Jewish concept. Yeah, we're not supposed to litter. We're not supposed to just pollute the earth. We're supposed to take care of our environment. Absolutely. That is a Jewish ethic. However, I think for a lot of people, climate change or whatever, it becomes like a religion, and they kind of end up worshiping the earth. Mother Earth, take care of her. This is our home, blah, blah. And a lot of times it puts, the power, it's really kind of audacious, that puts the power of God into the hands of human beings. On the one hand, we can completely change the climate of our entire planet. And on the other hand, we can't stop a hurricane from hitting the coast. So on the one hand, we can change everything and we can melt ice caps. But on the other hand, if a big tornado is coming towards us, we're basically helpless. But in looking at these insights, what I want you to see, because as I look at this, I think, well, this becomes like a religion. What's the root of it? Because there's nothing new under the sun, and the Satan has been the Satan and always has been the Satan, right? And so what is it basically when it comes to climate change, what people are looking for is stability. We don't want anything to change ultimately, right? What's the root cause of that? I hope I'm making sense here, because as I look at this, I'm like, I see something here that's very interesting. So let's look at some of the insights and see what we can glean, because the reality is, I'm kind of giving it away here, but prior to the flood, basically the whole world was essentially perfect in terms of climate. You and I may disagree on what our perfect climate is. I prefer, my wife likes it a little warmer. I prefer it a little cooler. But I think most people would say that a climate in the 70s, partly sunny, kind of into the 60s in the evening is pretty much perfect, right? It's not too cold, it's not too hot, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this is basically how it was prior to the flood. Our climate was steady, it was perfect, et cetera, and so on. Let's read and get into this. So it says in verse 22 of capítulo 8, it says, continuously all the days of the earth, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. So it says, this verse generally taken as an announcement that the regular cycle of the season and days, which had been disturbed during the deluge, will never again be disturbed. This view takes for granted that the same seasons we have today existed before the flood, but this does not seem to correspond with the earlier traditions. Indeed, Rabbi Yitzhak holds that before the flood, the land had to be cultivated once only every 40 years. It was, in fact, eternally spring, and the seasons and the temperatures were the same on all continents. Because remember, before the flood, all the continents were connected. There was one continent. Communication from one end of the earth to the other was not difficult, for men had enormous physical strength, and the continents had not yet been separated. This is come Midrash Rabbah 35. They did separate after the flood, and since then, men have only very gradually succeeded in conquering the earth's vastness by artificial means. So it goes on to say, consequently, the changes of seasons indicated here are to be taken as a post-Diluvian innovation. This is why Rabbi Shmuel ben Nachman would later cry out when the weather would give him a headache. Sometimes when barometric pressure changes, some people, the Rebbetzin is this way, they get headaches, right? When a storm is approaching or a change in weather, some people get headaches. Well, this happened to Rabbi Shmuel ben Nachman, and he would cry out, do you see what we owe to the generation of the flood? What did he mean? He meant that prior to the flood, there wasn't such a change. There wasn't these radical barometric pressure changes. It was eternally spring. It was we were dancing through daffodils and skipping and hopping with rabbits across green meadows. Doesn't that sound ideal? All you need is a Haagen-Dazs. You need to skip through daffodils and hop with rabbits with a Haagen-Dazs in your mouth, and it's eternally sunny. Not too hot, not too cold. That's what we're looking for, right? But why was that not ideal for us, actually? And this is a very important life lesson that we're about to get to. So it says this. Listen to this is the issue. So the rabbi is lamenting, do you see what we owe the generation of the flood? Had they not been wicked, there wouldn't have been a flood, and we wouldn't be dealing with climate issues. But it says here, and this is what drew me to this topic today, stability in climate conditions and the extraordinary longevity enjoyed before the flood are considered as essential causes of the general depravity of the times. The changes which took place in the shape of the continents and in the atmospheric conditions are confirmed by research in the fields of geology and physical geography. Archaeological remains, fossils, and traces of primitive age show that the distribution of seasons and temperatures differed from those that we have now, and the shaping of the continents by oceans and rivers and mountains and deserts are of the period more recent than creation. So therefore, the saying of our sages seeming to indicate that the flood was caused by altering the positions of certain constellations, which in turn brought about a disturbance in the telluric equilibrium and Barakot 59a in the Talmud, our sages considered in any case that the changes of the seasons came about only after the flood. Okay. But let's go back to this statement. And this is a life lesson for all of us. It's not just about climate change. This is about just life in general. Remember the statement I just read. Stability in climate conditions and the extraordinary longevity enjoyed before the flood are considered as essential causes of the general depravity of the times. Here's the reality. Perfect weather, perfect climate, longevity of our lives, all those things that we would like to have, and what some people in their pursuit of the climate change agenda, it's the religious part of it, which is we want a stable climate, actually lends itself to depravity. Guys, none of us like trials. None of us like to have to work necessarily. I mean, some people like work and they enjoy it. That's not what I mean. But I mean, just having the struggles of life. And this includes the seasons, having to work, plant in the spring and harvest in the fall and deal with the changing temperatures and so forth. We would rather it just be always perfect weather and always sunny. But here's the reality is that when we don't have these challenges in our life, we don't have, these struggles, these trials, we don't grow. I love what somebody said one time on something I was listening to about during the Hanukkah season. And the person said, we want it always to be sunny with never any storms. Well, the only place where that holds true is the desert, and nothing grows there. Conversely, if you look at the rainforest where it's always storming and raining and there's changing that's going on, then you have prolific life. And this is why you and I should, as humans, on the one hand, we're trying to strive to make life easier. And unfortunately, a lot of times trying to make life easier is to our detriment. And so the point here is that climate change and the flood, the change of the reason God gave us seasons after the flood was for our good. Because having just one season, basically, for 40 years, turned out to make us soft. It's like we were reading recently that in the Talmud, think about this. This is the Talmud 2,000 years ago. And it said that, I'm paraphrasing, but basically it said that parents that pamper their children, the child will grow up demanding and entitled. Isn't that interesting? How many of you would agree with that statement? You pamper your children, and I think the Talmud mentioned, now that I remember, it mentioned giving them warm baths, which back then was far more of a chore than it is today. But would you agree with that? Of course, I think, if you're rational, you would, of course. This is the wisdom of 2,000. You see how nothing has changed. See, the more we're pampered, you think, well, I want to be pampered in life. Well, it doesn't produce a good result. Now, how many of you would agree that for those of you who grew up in the school of hard knocks, you're far more prepared to deal with life. You're wiser, you're more mature, you're more stable. For those of you, and myself included, who did not grow up getting any and everything you wanted, who didn't grow up with a silver spoon in your mouth. And by the way, if you did grow up in a super wealthy family, well, good for you. And I mean that, good for you. I'm not being sarcastic. I mean it. I don't begrudge anybody anything. But for those of us who, when when we were 16, we just prayed that our car didn't fall apart while we were driving it. Those kinds of things. I always joke and say I had was a funny. Well, I was in high school. I was registering for my. I was at the office. It was right before school started. I was registering for my senior year in high school, and I had a Camaro. Of course, it was a '75 Camaro, which back then was an old car. And my Camaro, it was fast, but it also leaked every fluid that it had. It had a built-in smoke screen when I drove down the road, and the AC didn't work in it. It was a car that a young man like me should have. But I'll never forget when I was in line. Here I am. I'm a getting ready to be a senior, and there's all these other students around, and so the registrar said, "You need to get a parking pass for your car. What kind of car do you have?" And I just said, "It's true." I said, "Well, I have a Camaro." And then, of course, all the other students and some of the young ladies were like, "Ooh, a Camaro." Of course, what they didn't realize was my Camaro was what it was. It was interesting. But you know what? That makes you appreciate things in the future, right? We would, back then, I could tell you, I would love to have had a brand new Camaro, but I probably would have grown up to be a spoiled, rotten brat too, right? So it says, to be sure, the earth had previously undergone certain periods of change, but they had followed one another at long intervals. Hence, men had enjoyed long periods of stability in nature and in the physical realm, and this led them to an easy and frivolous existence, scarcely requiring any effort or struggle on their part. When these long, carefree ages encouraged increasing evil and were witness to the old, rich, opulent, and immoral, which became a massive destructive force, and this easy life led to the inevitable demise of the people. Again, it's a catch-22. On the one hand, we want an easy life. We pray for shalom in our life. We pray that things should be easy. And I pray that for you, and I pray that for me. And at the same time, easy does not produce goodness. And we should remember this. And so therefore, when we're in an environment and we say, man, summer's coming or hard winter is coming, man, I wish I lived in a place where it was constantly 70 degrees. When you say that to yourself, I want you to remember the pre-flood generation. And thank God for the hardship. Now, I'm not talking here, of course, I'm not talking just about climate. I'm talking about just life in general. When we're facing those challenges, or when you're working and sweat is pouring off your brow and you're thinking, oh, golly, this is hard work, I want you to think to yourself, yeah, and it's also helping me be a better person. Hard work, striving helps us to be a better people. It says, but Rabbi Monk is his commentary. He says, but henceforth the plan for mankind's upbringing, which was to assure the permanency of life on earth without further recourse for catastrophe or worldwide destruction, was based on the principle that different seasons and climate conditions will always exist on earth simultaneously. So isn't that interesting? Climate change is part of the program to help us keep from having to be destroyed. Think about that, ladies and gentlemen. When you have people that their religion is, we've got to save the earth from any changes, which, by the way, we have no power over that. I mean, we can muck stuff up and dirty things up, but you know what I mean, okay? If we can't change the course of a hurricane, hello, okay? But I want to dive deeper into the religious psychology of that. And that is that God gives us these changes on purpose to keep us from becoming like the generation of the flood. In other words, it's grace. Sometimes we have blizzards and people freak out and go, oh my gosh, it's never been this cold before. You know, my dad was talking to somebody, a young person, and I may be getting my dates wrong. I was a wee little bitty lad when this happened, so I'm not sure if the date was right. But anyway, my dad was talking to a young person. He was talking about the snowmageddon we had a couple of years ago, or a year ago, whenever it was. And this young person said, oh, it's never been cold like that. And he says, you weren't alive in 1980. It was much colder for much longer here in Texas. The point, in fact, is every time we think it's never been cold or hot like this, it actually has. We had a really, really hot summer. It was terrible here in Texas. I very much disliked it. And it's been hotter, much hotter here in my lifetime. So hot, in fact, that back in those days, people were putting ice cubes in their pools to cool down. My point is this, is that we think that it's never been this bad before, but in fact it has. And it's for our good. The breakup of the continents and the territories were included in the fundamental change solemnly proclaimed here. So the fact that we have now continents that are separated and we have different regions, desert regions, snow regions, tropical regions, that's all to keep us on the right track. Isn't this interesting? So it says here, because of these new conditions, man became dependent on his physical environment. It no longer sufficed to sow just once every 40 years. Continual changes in nature and its loss of vigor compared with antediluvian conditions now exacted careless effort from humanity. Excuse me, not careless. I'm sorry. I misread that. Ceaseless effort. Moreover, the new conditions serve to create more complex individuals, different in goodness, but also in degree of evil. Another consequence of the more frequent and more rapid changes in our natural phenomenon was that the human lifespan was shortened, and it has remained approximately the same ever since the flood. The point, in fact, here is that idleness and easiness lead to sin. Idleness and easiness lead to sin. And that's the moral of the story. And so this is why climate change is part of the discussion of the flood. So as we are in our situation here in the northern hemisphere, and we are in the middle of fall, and we're headed towards winter, as the climate is changing, I want you to understand that part of the climate change is God's grace to keep you and I from becoming extraordinarily evil. End of our Aliyah today. We left a lot on the table, but you know what? We're out of time, but never out of content. That is just the way it goes. And we'll just continue to learn and continue to grow as we go. You have a great day, a great prep day. And I pray that your Erev Shabbat tonight is amazing. I pray that you'll join me in the synagogue tomorrow so we can have a wonderful time together. And until then, be richly blessed. Enjoy the beautiful, if you live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, enjoy the beautiful rain today. And we will look forward to seeing everybody mañana. Shalom Aleichem and Shabbat Shalom.